Hi there, I'm Evan Finch with Power-Tek Group, and I'll be doing a little demonstration today on the 381 FLUKE meter, and I'll also be going over how to use it and all the functions on it, the different leads we have. We have our regular leads for measuring voltages, ohms, and then we have also our iFlex probe, which is a fantastic little addition. It also comes with a neat remote display, which we'll go over as well. But to start off, we'll go over the traditional leads and how to use measuring voltage, amps, ohms, everything like that. So we'll get the camera a little closer and we'll zoom in and we'll show you how she works. So zoom up, look at the meter here. When we're connecting the leads, you can see here you got your red and your black. Black is common, red is for your continuity, voltage, and ohm testing. So we'll go ahead and plug those in. Now we're ready. We'll turn the meter, we'll start with voltage and work our way up through, and we'll go through every aspect. So here we go. Voltage. We don't have anything live to test right now, but we'll talk a little bit about safety when you're going to do live testing, test voltage. You always want to have on your gloves, your calibrated gloves, just to protect you from any potential shocks, or if you're in there close to bus bars, you want to have that protection. So that's quite important. Also, you want to have your arc flash gear on. You have to read the label on the front of the equipment you're in. It'll have a arc flash sticker on it. It should have a cal rating, and that's what you base the type of suit and PPE required to enter that live. So now that we have our voltage on, you would just take your red lead and your black lead, and you would test either between phase and phase, phase and ground, phase and neutral, depending on what you want to measure. You can see the leads here have a little twist function that can expose the probe at the end more or close it up. So you want to make sure those are open so you're making good contact on your points, your measure points, and away you go. So a cool thing about this meter with the remote display is like any other meter, you can do your regular testing, but with this you can actually unclip that with it on. You have to make sure it's on first. You need to put this up to 30 feet away. So let's say you're taking some readings and you need somebody to record those for you. You're in a loud area, you're all suited up. You can put that up over off to the side or over 30 feet away where he is. And instead of yelling out readings to him, he can actually see what's going on. You can just say, A phase to ground, B phase to ground, C phase to ground, etc. And he would have that over there. So that's kind of a situation where you could use this remote display effectively. So for our next demonstration, we're going to use a battery to test for DC voltage. We'll show you how that works. So I'll turn the meter on to volts DC. We'll turn on our backlight there. And here we go. I'll put the red lead on the red, the black on the black. And it should, being a 12 volt battery, show us around 12 volts. And it does 12 volts DC. Perfect. So that's how you test DC voltage. Black with negative, red with positive. And with the remote display, I'll give you a little example of that. So we'll take that off and we'll test the battery here again. And no problem. Like I said, up to 30 feet away you can go with that display and it'll still give you a perfectly accurate reading. And while we're on the DC battery part, I'll show you if you happen to reverse the leads, it'll give you a negative voltage. So if I put red on black and black on red, you got negative 12.7 volts. So with this demonstration, we'll go on next to the ohms and continuity tests. So we'll start off with continuity, which is a very helpful way of measuring and troubleshooting circuits when you're wanting to test wires between, let's say, phase and ground, just to make sure you have no shorts before you energize any electrical. So you can hear the tone when you touch the leads together as a direct short. Anytime you have a short, you'll hear that tone, and it'll give you a resistance value like very low, around 0 or just around 0. So when you're testing a 120 volt line to a ground, you want to have no tone. You don't want to have any short between line and ground or line and neutral, because that'd be very bad. It would cause a equipment failure or blow it up. You don't want that. You can also test, if you have multiple wires, you can take one end of a wire if you need to identify. You can, say tie the red wire to the ground, and then at the other end you can test the ground and then test your wires, and okay, that's the red one there. When you get the tone, you'll be able to hear, okay, that's our wire, because you know it's shorted at the other end. So it's helpful in that way as well. We'll talk a little bit about the ohm value on here. So when you want to measure ohms, this say we'll start with a resistor. If you had a resistor, a lot of time fire alarm, you deal with resistors. You can test and see, if you don't know your color code, you can see the value. It'll come up on the screen. Let's say you had a 2.2 k ohm resistor, it should come up 2.2 or 2.21 or somewhere close around 2.2. It's not going to be exact, but close enough to tell you exactly what resistor value that is. Also, if you wanted to test resistance on a coil to troubleshoot, if you're having issues, you can see, we got a higher than normal resistance value, where it's lower than normal. It's great for troubleshooting in that sense too, to be able to identify any issues with electronic coils, windings, anything like that. So on the next one, we're going to go up to amps AC. The little sine wave above, that always indicates that that's AC voltage. And you can see the difference between DC amps. It's got the straight line with the dash underneath it. We know that's DC. So you can use these leads when you're measuring amperage. Like you could put it in line of a circuit, but that's not the ideal way to do it. Unless you're working on like a proto board or something, in a lab, it would work great there. But in practical theory, you're going to use the jaw clamp here to measure your amperage, or your iFlex probe, which we'll go over shortly. So for now, I'll just disconnect these leads and put them off to the side. Here we're going to go over the Amperage AC. I've turned the dial to amps AC. I've got a little test wire here to show you how to properly clip onto a wire to measure. So you see the little red trigger here, that actually opens up the jaw. So most cases in the field, you're going to see this terminated, so you're not going to be able to slide it on like that. You're going to have to clip it on. And when you do, you want your little dashes. You can see there's 2 dashes on there. You want those to center of the conductor, so it's right in the middle of the probe for the more accurate and precise readings. And I'll show you here also on there's 1,000 amps, it says there. That's the rating of this. This can measure up to 1,000 amps. And for the voltage, a Cat 3 is good for 1,000 volts. A Cat 2 is good for 600 volts. This is a Cat 3 meter, so we are good for 1,000 volt readings on this. So now we're also with AC amperage. We have the remote display. Again, we'll talk about that. You can unclip that, put that up to 30 feet away. Same thing, if you want to do readings with your amp probe and somebody is over there in a quieter spot, they can see your readings on there and jot them down. Also, we'll talk a little bit now over on amperage about the inrush. So these meters have the capability of seeing inrush current as overcurrent protection sees it, which is super helpful for anybody wanting to size their wire or know the FLA of a motor, if they're the inrush current when you start it up, and how much they need to properly fuse so that it's not tripping all the time. So a good example of when you would use the inrush in the remote display would be if you're in a piece of equipment where you need to put the meter and the leads inside and close like a disc, we'll say a disconnect for example, or a motor starter. You can throw that in there, close it up so you're safe, and then energize it with your remote display here, like over where it's safe, so you can safely document the readings. Well, this is over where it's the live voltage is all taking place. I'll also know with the amperage and the inrush that you can measure inrush using the jaws as well as our iFlex probe. In most cases, iFlex probe is the way to go for your inrush measurements. You can wrap this around bigger conductors in tighter areas. It's just a great little addition. And I'll go over on how to plug this in. It only goes one way. You can see there it plugs in like that. It's kind of a key way where you can't mess it up. And then when you want to do that, you turn to iFlex. There's a little iFlex on the dial where you want to use to. It won't work. Like if you have it on amperage like that and you try to use this, that's a mistake. This is only for using this part of it. So to elaborate a little more on the iFlex versus the jaws, you can see when you're on the iFlex setting, the little flashing, last year with the flashing little button in there is on. But when you turn this to Amperage AC, you can see it has the jaw clamp with the flashing button. So that's for that. So that's how you can tell what's what and whether you're on the right setting. So we'll talk about this. We'll keep it on iFlex. To open this loop up, there's a little lock right here. You just turn this like that, and that pops right in super easily. And this is great for large conductors, for tight areas. You can get right into a splitter, for example, or wrap it around, plug it in. And it's got a nice long cord, so you can put the meter over here. And again, you can also take your remote display, keep this over where the live parts are, bring this over to a safe area, a quiet area to take your measurements, and it's great. It's great. You can watch your inrush. So let's do a little example of inrush now that we're on that. You have to press that inrush button. You'll see on the screen here, it says a little inrush indicator comes up on the top, and you're ready to go. If you, let's say, for example, you got this connected around your wire for your motor, you go over to your motor starter, you press start, and it's going to measure that reading. And you can press the hold button when it does measure that to keep that. So when then you de-energize it, it's still on the screen. That's helpful. Another little note about this iFlex is it only does the AC amps. It won't do DC amperage, but it can do up to 2,500 amps opposed to 1,000 amps. For the jaws, this bumps it up to 2,500 amps, so that's also a very nice feature of this. When you want to measure DC amps, you just have to turn it to your amps DC and use the jaw. Or use your leads and do it in line with the circuit if you're doing like a protoboard or something like that, or a control circuit or whatever. So I'll talk a little bit too about the hertz, which is frequency. You can also measure that with your iFlex and your jaws. So you can see the yellow button here in the yellow HC. That indicates that if you want to see that you have your 60 hertz frequency, which is the most standard here in Canada, you want to make sure it's right on 60 hertz. You can wrap that around your circuit with the iFlex probe, and then press your button, and it'll measure your hertz reading. You could also use the jaw, same deal. Instead of this, you can just clip onto your conductor like that, press your hertz, it'll measure the frequency. In summary, this meter is fantastic. Like other meters, it has all your normal functions of measuring voltage and amperage, but in addition, it's got the removable magnetic remote display, which is awesome. Your iFlex probe, which is good for up to 2,500 amps, opposed to 1,000 with this. That's super helpful with the lock, and then you get bigger wires on it. You can measure the inrush with this too. It's fantastic, especially if you're a commercial electrician or you have a lot of industrial type jobs where you're needing that sort of measuring. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and hope you've learned a little something from me about the 381 FLUKE.